All right, y'all, welcome back. So now my focus is kind of turned toward, because I'm still in, plant hunters, and my work is now kind of turned towards focusing on different publications or works that record the violence, excuse me, of plant hunters, especially during like the golden age, and honestly throughout time, since this became the phenomena that it was. Um, and yeah, I know this is AI, but I'm going to be doing what I can to confirm a lot of this information. They are still pulling from different sources. It's just a matter of vetting those sources, confirming things by two or three. That's kind of the rule that I use. Excuse me. And so I briefly do want to go over this. And so I guess I'll just read this. So, the golden age of plant hunting in the 19th century was categorized by a violent intersection of imperial ambition, commercial greed, and environmental destruction. Far from being purely scientific endeavors, these expeditions often involved the forced extraction of resources from colonial territories, the suppression of indigenous knowledge, and even lethal competition between rival collectors. And it was much more than that. It's still a sanitized way of presenting it. Botany in the 1800s was weaponized to fuel programs of political expansion and wealth extraction. Imperial conflict and coercion. Plant hunters frequently relied on military force or the aftermath of war to access restricted territories. For instance, the Opium Wars forced China to open areas to foreign travel, allowing collectors like Robert Fortune to operate in regions where discovery previously meant imprisonment or death. And we'll read more about the specific conflicts in Patersky's work. Destruction of rival gains. In the height of the Victorian orchid craze, competition was so fierce that collectors would sometimes destroy entire wild populations of rare plants after harvesting them to ensure their rivals could not obtain the same species. Excuse me. Exploitive plantation systems. The act of quote unquote planting itself was a form of colonial violence. Environments were radically altered through the imposition of monocultures, often rooted in the suffering and death of enslaved people. For example, the cultivation of nutmeg by the Dutch East Indian Company in the Banda Islands led to extraordinary violence against the local population. And of course, we know a lot about what happened here in the Americas, specifically North America also. Erasure of indigenous knowledge. While plant hunting relied heavily on the support and expertise of local people, the prevailing narrative often carefully concealed this, framing discoveries as feats of individual British daring do. And we see like the Kew Gardens, which is a lot of what this work speaks to, and honoring again those quote unquote what would be to them unsung heroes of conquest, perpetrators of violence, for Britain. But I do just want to say, because some people may be thinking, why do I always make the emphasis of the North American experience? Well, one, it's because I have ancestral ties to this land. Two, I identify as a foundational Black American, which I think is a more proper and accurate term to describe our people with our relationship to having been the very foundation of this country. And a lot of our ancestry also predates that. But also, too, because unfortunately, in these times, we're experiencing this sort of resurgence of hate and division, which is fine, but by people who might be skin folk, but truly are not kinfolk. After all, as we saw in a lot of these other videos, it was many of those who looked like ourselves who sold us into slavery in the first place or enslaved us. And though that's not the story of all of our ancestors, because again, a lot of us were native here, living peacefully, living our lives, minding our business. That is for some, of our ancestors. And so, yeah, this sort of idea that there's this allegiance or coalition or whatever term you want to use is really an illusion. And it's unfortunate. But there's always been this sort of reality of this buffer class to separate, the dominant society from the true victims of their horrific actions and behaviors and choices and institutions and systems. And those in that quote unquote buffer class really do strive. And we'll kind of maybe, if it goes to that point, delve into how many of them for many different nations, namely mainly immigrants, have sought to align themselves with whiteness, the social, political, right, economic sort of construction, to secure wealth, success, status, benefits in a society that was again built upon the very people that they are seeking to harm and that they are blatantly and deliberately disrespecting, all the while committing crimes and scamming and everything else. And it's ridiculous. And unfortunately, it's been something that has been happening long before many of them have immigrated to the land or even been afforded that through the efforts of those enslaved here, those foundational Black Americans who made it possible for them to even come over here. And so we're going to see some of that. And why is it relevant? Who cares? Well, when we look into again, the ethnobotanical systems, when we look into the field of botany and herbalism, you're going to start to notice some of these BIPOC organizations that, again, seek to kind of clump everybody together who tends to be melanated. And even in that, there's erasure and there's all types of bullcrap going on. And the record needs to be set straight. And light needs to be shed on the inequities within that. So in a way, like nobody's exempt, And so, yeah, y'all, It gets deep, but I wanted to read this. The pursuit of botanical wealth often inseparable from the broader violence of settler colonialism. In territories like California in the 1800s, white settlers, including those seeking gold and other resources, perpetrated massacres and engaged in the human trafficking. Again, another just modern way for them to kind of sanitize. Even though we know that the connotations of this are still horrible, it's still a way deliberate to use phrasing and language to soften what it really was of indigenous people. Botanical expansion provided the economic justification for the displacement and genocide of native tribes across the Americas. And I'm glad they said that instead of Indians or red Indians. Because as we know, there were thousands of native tribes in America filled with dark skinned, dark complected, brown skinned people. The ancestors of those descending who would be called today foundational Black American. And so, yeah, I don't really want to hear much about any sort of complaining as to why it is that this truth is starting to be centered, or I'm choosing to center that on my page. Because for far too long, this crap has been in the margins. Honestly, not even that. It's been buried. So yeah, it's going to be the main focus, as long as there's breath in my body. All right, anyway. So this particular work to me was very interesting. I don't know, did I already talk about this? Can't remember. Spanning nearly 600 years, might as well be. I know that's closer to like $5.50 if we round it up, but you know how we do. If it's $5, it's $20. Nearly 600 years of resistance and resurgence, this botany of violence for one particular plant of South America, and many of the empires and peoples who, you know, were responsible in this alone. Right? Very interesting. Okay? Very interesting. And just from this record alone, we see that there are hundreds. I mean, this is particularly stating 125. We read in earlier pages with Bartram that it was close to 350, and that's just one Bartram, and all the other dozens of men mentioned, and the hundreds upon hundreds, at some point into the thousands upon thousands of different plants. And you think about, what is that movie, Jungle Explorer or whatever, with The Rock and I can't remember her name. And it's a Disney film because, of course, they try to inundate the minds of children to start shaping the narratives and telling lies, But I think that's a really good film to kind of point to how they romanticize, sanitize, whitewash, conquest, and soften it, right? Her brother, very effeminate in nature. The woman being a little more masculine in nature, falling in love with this charismatic guide. Yeah, you had the Caucasian gentleman who took his engine from his ship and was seemingly the bad guy, but even he had a level of charisma, and it's all of these ways. Film. At one point I had film studies as one of my minors because I understand just how profound, powerful, and important imagery is. It sears the psyche, and in many ways it's unforgettable. And it panders to and plays upon the emotions in such a way where, it's powerful. To be able to depict something. And as we know, that art, the skill in that has been utilized in a devious way too. There's darkness in every industry, unfortunately, But a lot of this stuff is intertwined in the films that children in this society are exposed to at a very early age, because that's where the conditioning begins, and the entertainment and on the television. And it's innuendo. It's subtle. You know what I mean? Things you won't really pick up until you rewatch it in your adulthood, if you've, studied and done the work to educate yourself and to inform yourself of a lot of the unfortunate realities of this system. And then you realize, wait a minute. What? If y'all get it, y'all get it. If you don't, it's all good. But yeah, very violent. A very, very violent time. Many violent times. But this, right? All these efforts to build what we know to be botany and Western herbalism that, again, still influenced and impacted nations the world over and the systems they would have put in place and employ. Extremely violent. So yeah, I'm going to be delving into more stuff specifically with regard to North America. I mean, there are just numerous resources, and it's crazy because you almost have to go through like 50 different resources in order to, you know, oh, I need to sign in. Like finally piece together one or two truths. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. But yeah, y'all, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, share. Check out this resource, you know, once I'm done with it. Again, this is the Internet Archive. This is entitled The Golden Age of Planters by Kenneth Lemon or Lemon. I'm not sure how he'd prefer that pronounced. And yeah, start looking into some of these people and what their relations were to the slave trade and, you know, to the violence of this time. And y'all be blessed. Thank you for tuning in.